The sun that day was a brilliant, benevolent gold, casting a warm, honeyed glow over the vineyard. It was the kind of weather you pray for, but rarely receive, a celestial blessing for my daughter's wedding. I stood at the edge of the manicured lawn, my heart feeling too large for my chest, swelling with a pride so profound it bordered on pain. Isabella, my Bella. She was a vision, a sculpture in ivory, silk, and lace, her laughter echoing like wind chimes as she posed for photographs with her bridesmaids. I adjusted my tie, the unfamiliar stiffness a reminder of the formality of the occasion. For 25 years, it had been just the two of us. Her mother, my Elena, had been taken from us by a swift and merciless cancer when Bella was only 3. The memories of Elena were a faded, precious album in my mind, but Bella was her living legacy. She had her mother's same dark, expressive eyes, the same graceful curve of her smile. I'd spent a lifetime trying to be both father and mother, mending scraped knees and broken hearts, braiding hair for school plays, and drying tears after nightmares. Every sacrifice, every overtime shift, every moment of worry had been for this, to see her radiant, joyful, and stepping into a future with a man who adored her. David, her groom, was a good man, steady, kind, with a calm demeanor that balanced Bella's vibrant fire. Seeing the way he looked at her, with a mixture of awe and unwavering devotion, quieted the last, faint whispers of a father's anxiety. The ceremony was a blur of overwhelming emotion. I walked her down the aisle, her arm linked tightly in mine, her fingers trembling slightly. "I love you, Dad," she had whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I love you more, baby," I'd murmured back, my own vision blurring as I placed her hand in David's. Now, the reception was in full swing. String lights were beginning to twinkle in the twilight, and the air was rich with the scent of blooming jasmine and roasting meat. The sound of clinking glasses and joyful chatter was a symphony of happiness. I moved through the crowd, accepting handshakes and backslaps, a permanent, dazed smile on my face. This was it, the culmination of my life's work. The perfect day, the moment for the father of the bride's speech arrived. A hush fell over the guests as I tapped my microphone, the sound echoing slightly in the soft evening air. I looked out at the sea of familiar, smiling faces, family, friends, colleagues who had watched Bella grow up. My gaze finally settled on her, sitting beside David at the sweetheart table, her face upturned, expectant and beautiful. "They say," I began, my voice a little rough with emotion, "that being a father to a daughter is a special kind of privilege. It's a front row seat to watch a miracle unfold." I cleared my throat, finding my rhythm. "From the moment you came into this world, Bella, you were my entire world. You were this tiny, fierce thing with your mother's eyes, and you owned my heart from the first second." I spoke of her childhood, a few carefully chosen, humorous anecdotes that made the crowd laugh. I spoke of Elena, my voice softening. "Your mother would be so incredibly proud of the woman you've become. She's here, in you, in this beautiful day." I turned to David. "And David, welcome to the family. Take care of my greatest treasure." I raised my glass, the champagne bubbling in the soft light. "To my daughter, Isabella, and my new son, David. May your lives be filled with as much love and joy as you've brought to mine." To the bride and groom. The guests erupted in a chorus of "To the bride and groom." Glasses were raised and sipped. I looked at Bella, expecting to see her smiling, perhaps even tearing up. But she wasn't. She was staring at me, her expression completely blank. The warmth had vanished from her eyes, replaced by something cold and hard. The applause died down. The moment stretched, becoming awkward. And then she stood up. The legs of her chair scraped loudly against the stone patio. The gentle murmur of the crowd faded into a stunned silence. She walked toward me, her steps slow and deliberate on the flagstones, her wedding dress whispering around her. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes locked on mine. The microphone was still in my hand, loosely held at my side. The perfect day froze, teetering on the edge of cliff. Her voice, when she spoke, was not a whisper. It was clear, cold, and sharp, cutting through the silent air and reaching every corner of the courtyard. "You," she said, her voice dripping with a venom I had never heard before. "You don't deserve to be here." The words hung in the air, absolute and incomprehensible. I felt the bottom drop out of my world. The perfect day shattered into a million pieces, and I was left standing in the wreckage, holding a silent microphone, with no idea why. For a moment, there was no sound at all. It was as if the entire world had been put on mute. The string lights, the expectant faces, the half-finished glasses of champagne. Everything was frozen in a tableau of perfect horror. I could feel the weight of 100 stunned gazes, but I was locked in the vortex of my daughter's own, her eyes like chips of dark ice. The microphone felt like a lead weight in my hand. My mind, reeling, tried to form a word, any word, but my tongue was numb, glued to the roof of my mouth. Deserve? What could I possibly not deserve? Had I not earned this moment with every sleepless night, every sacrificed dream, every ounce of love a human heart could hold? A nervous, choked cough came from the crowd. It broke the spell. Bella's lip curled, a gesture of such pure contempt it was a physical blow. "You stand here," she continued, her voice trembling now, but with rage, not emotion. "You talk about love. You talk about her. You pretend." She took a step closer, and I instinctively took a step back, a reflex of sheer self-preservation. "This whole day, this whole life is a lie you built, and you don't get to toast it. You don't get to pretend you're my father." The word father was a slap. David was on his feet now, his face ashen. "Bella, please," he said, moving toward her, his hand outstretched in a placating gesture. "Stay out of this, David," she snapped, not even looking at him. Her focus was entirely, terrifyingly, on me. "He knows. He's always known." "Known what, Bella?" I finally managed, my voice a raw, broken thing, barely a whisper. The microphone wasn't necessary. The entire wedding was leaning in, a captivated, horrified audience to our destruction. "What are you talking about?" "Don't," she hissed, her composure finally cracking. Tears of fury now streamed down her face, cutting tracks through her carefully applied makeup. "Don't you dare play the confused, wounded father with me. Not after what you did to my mother." My mother. The way she said it was possessive, protective, as if she were guarding a ghost I had wronged. The wedding planner, a flustered young woman in a headset, made a move as if to intervene, but a sharp look from Bella stopped her dead. The power radiating from my daughter in that moment was absolute and terrifying. "This is not the time or place," David pleaded, his voice low and urgent, finally reaching her side. "There is no other time or place," she cried out, her voice echoing across the vineyard. "There is only this truth. He is not my father." The gasps from the crowd were audible this time, a collective, sharp intake of breath. I felt the words like a physical impact, driving the air from my lungs. The ground beneath my feet no longer felt solid. Bella looked from my shattered face to the stunned, silent guests. A strange, grim satisfaction seemed to settle over her features, as if she had completed a sacred, terrible duty. She then turned, her dress swirling around her, and without another word, she walked away. Not toward the house, but down the gravel path that led away from the reception into the gathering darkness. David stood frozen for a second, his gaze darting between his fleeing bride and the wreckage of the wedding. He gave me a look I couldn't decipher, part pity, part confusion, part horror, and then he went after her. The silence they left behind was louder than any noise. I was still standing there, the useless microphone hanging from my hand. The toast was poisoned. The perfect day was dead. All that remained was the devastating public accusation, hanging in the air like smoke. He is not my father. I didn't look at anyone. I couldn't. I carefully placed the microphone on the chair behind me and walked, my steps unsteady, through the parted crowd. I felt their eyes on me, their whispers beginning to rise like a swarm of locusts. I walked past the empty sweetheart table, past the half-eaten cake, and into the empty house, the sound of the party's stunned silence chasing me inside. The father of the bride had just been publicly unmasked as a fraud, and I had no idea what the truth was. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and shame. I left the wedding. I simply got in my car and drove, leaving the chaos, the whispers, and the ruins of my life behind me. I couldn't face anyone. What would I say? I'm sorry. I don't know why my daughter just denounced me as a fraud in front of everyone you know. The house was a tomb. I walked in. The silence a stark contrast to the festive noise I had left hours earlier. My tuxedo felt like a costume, a grotesque parody of a role I was now told I had never rightfully played. I ripped the bow tie off and threw it on the floor, the studs clattering against the hardwood. "You're not my father." The words echoed in the emptiness, each repetition a fresh wound. For 25 years, my identity had been built on a single, unshakable foundation. I was Isabella's father. It was the title I was most proud of, the core of my being. Now, that core had been hollowed out, declared a lie. But why? What truth did she possess? What could I have possibly done to her mother? Elena and I had loved each other. It wasn't a perfect storybook love. We had arguments, we had struggles, but it was real. It was devoted. The accusation made no sense, and yet the sheer, visceral conviction in Bella's eyes wasn't a delusion. She believed it with her entire soul. I poured a whiskey, my hand shaking so violently the bottle neck chattered against the glass. I drained it in one burning gulp, but it did nothing to numb the cold dread seeping into my bones. "He's always known," she had said. "Known what?" My eyes, wild and searching, landed on the ceiling. The attic, Elena's domain. After she died, I had packed away her things. I couldn't bear to sort through them, to make decisions about a lifetime condensed into boxes. It was too painful. For over 2 decades, that space had been sealed, a sacred tomb of memory. I never went up there. Bella never asked to. A cold resolve began to replace the paralyzing shock. If there was an answer, it would be there. In her things. The pull-down ladder was stiff, groaning in protest as I yanked the cord. A cloud of dust and the smell of old wood and forgotten things wafted down. I climbed up into the oppressive, stuffy air, a single bare bulb illuminating a landscape of cardboard and ghosts. There were her clothes, neatly folded in boxes. Her books. Our wedding album. I pushed past them, my heart hammering. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, only that I would know it when I found it. And then I saw it, tucked behind a stack of my old business papers, a box I didn't recognize. It wasn't a cardboard moving box, but a sturdy, antique wooden chest, the kind her grandmother had left her. It was darker, older than the others. A small brass padlock held it shut. I had never seen this box before. I carried it down as if it were a live bomb, setting it on the kitchen table under the harsh fluorescent light. The lock was small, flimsy. A few hard blows with a hammer from the garage, and it splintered away. I lifted the lid. The smell of old paper and cedar rose to meet me. On top lay a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. My breath caught. Elena's elegant, looping handwriting covered the envelopes. But they weren't addressed to me. They were addressed to a Michael, a name I knew. Michael was an old friend from her college days, someone she'd lost touch with long before we met. Or so I'd thought. Beneath the letters was a small, velvet jewelry box. I opened it. Inside wasn't her engagement ring or any piece I recognized. It was a simple silver locket. With trembling fingers, I pried it open. On one side was a tiny, faded photo of a young, smiling Elena. On the other side was a man. It wasn't me. He had dark, brooding eyes and a confident smile. Michael. My blood ran cold. This was a secret life, a life parallel to ours. I dug deeper, past a dry corsage, past concert tickets from years before we met. And then my fingers brushed against something stiff and official. I pulled it out. It was a sealed, legal-sized envelope, yellowed with age. Scrawled across the front, in Elena's handwriting, were 2 words that stopped my heart. For Isabella. This was it. The truth she had hurled at me. This was what she had found. I held the envelope, the paper feeling thin and insubstantial, yet containing the power to obliterate my entire world. The answers were in my hands. All I had to do was break the seal. The envelope felt like a live wire in my hands, humming with destructive potential. For Isabella, my daughter's name, written by her mother's hand, a message from beyond the grave meant to detonate the life I had built. The part of me that was still a grieving husband recoiled at the violation. This was Elena's secret, her private pain, entrusted to a box for her daughter, not for me. But the part of me that was a man publicly shattered, a father denounced, had no choice. The truth, however ugly, was now a necessity for survival. With a trembling finger, I slid a knife under the flap and sliced it open. The sound of tearing paper was obscenely loud in the silent kitchen. Inside, there was no letter. Instead, I pulled out a small, leather-bound book, its cover soft and worn. A diary. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had never known Elena kept a diary. She was a vibrant, present woman, not one for solitary brooding. Or so I had believed. I opened it to the first page. The date was from a year before we met. The entries were typical of a young woman. Thoughts on her classes, her friends, her dreams, and her feelings for Michael. The writing was effusive, passionate. I feel like my heart might burst when I'm with him. He sees a version of me I didn't know existed. I read it with a dull ache, the ghost of a normal jealousy. This was before me. She was entitled to her past. I flipped forward, the pages whispering their secrets. The entries became more intense. Talks of a future. Then a sudden, stark entry, just a few lines. It's over. He's gone. His family is moving him across the country. He said it's for the best. He said we're too young. My world has ended. The following pages were a chronicle of grief. Then, a few months later, a new, determined tone emerged. I need to move on. I need a new life. I met a man today. John. He's kind. He's stable. He's nothing like Michael. The words were a punch to the gut. Nothing like Michael. I was the antidote to her poison, the safe harbor after the storm. I kept reading, my dread growing. Our courtship was documented with a clinical detachment that broke my heart. She wrote about my reliability, my good job, my calm demeanor. She never wrote about love, not the dizzying, all-consuming passion she had felt for Michael. Then came the entry that made the room tilt around me. The date was just after I had proposed. I'm pregnant. I've done the math. It's been 2 months since I saw Michael that one last time. It's his. I know it with a certainty that terrifies me. John is so happy about the engagement. He will be a good father. He will provide. What other choice do I have? I have to do this. For the baby. I will never tell a soul. The words swam on the page. I had to read them 3 times before their meaning fully seared itself into my brain. It's his. Isabella was not my daughter. The foundation of my life, the very bedrock upon which every decision, every sacrifice, every joy for the past 25 years had been built, crumbled into dust. I was not her father. Bella's words at the wedding were not a cruel fiction. They were a brutal, biological fact. A torrent of emotions crashed over me. Betrayal, so profound it felt like a physical sickness, a grief for the child I'd lost in an instant, a rage at the woman I had loved for a lie that had spanned a lifetime. All those years, she had looked at me. She had let me love Bella. She had held my hand as we welcomed our daughter into the world, all the while knowing the truth. I read on, a masochistic need driving me to the bitter end. The entries after Bella's birth were filled with a quiet, desperate anxiety. She has his eyes. Every time I look at her, I see him. I live in fear that John will notice. She wrote of her guilt, a constant, gnawing presence beneath the surface of our happy family life. She wrote of her love for Bella, a love that was pure and fierce, and her complicated, grateful affection for me, the man who was giving her child a name and a stable home. The final entry was dated a week before she died. The handwriting was shaky, weakened by the disease that was consuming her. The pain is unbearable, but the guilt is worse. I am leaving my daughter with a lie. John is a good man. He loves her as his own. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the truth would only cause pain. I have written a letter for Bella, to be given to her when she turns 25. She deserves to know where she comes from. Forgive me. I close the book. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. The whiskey glass sat untouched. The world outside the window was the same, but I was not. I was a stranger to myself. The man I had been, John, the devoted father, was a character in a play written by a dead woman. The love of my life had built my entire existence on a foundation of sand. And my daughter, my Bella, had discovered the truth and saw me not as a victim of the same lie, but as its architect. She thought I had known. She thought I had pretended all these years. I had the truth now, but it was a truth that offered no solace, only a deeper, more desolate ruin. The diary lay on the kitchen table like an accusation. I could not bear to touch it again. The soft leather cover seemed to hide a venom that had already seeped into my soul, paralyzing me. I sat in the same chair for hours, the night bleeding into a gray, meaningless dawn. The world had lost all its color, all its sound. I was a ghost in the shell of my own life. Elena's words replayed in my mind, a torturous loop. It's his. I will never tell a soul. John is so happy. Each phrase was a scalpel, meticulously dissecting my past and revealing the rotten core I had never sensed. The headaches she'd claimed to have when I wanted intimacy during her pregnancy. The way she'd sometimes look at Bella with a strange, sad longing that I mistook for a mother's overwhelming love. It all rearranged itself into a new, horrifying pattern. But a stubborn, practical part of my brain, the part that had built a career on details, refused to fully surrender. The diary was one thing. It was her truth, her secret confession. But was it the truth? I needed something official. Something cold and bureaucratic that couldn't be argued with. I needed the final piece of evidence. I stood up, my joints stiff and protesting. I walked to my home office, the room feeling alien and unfamiliar, as if I were walking through a museum of a stranger's life. In the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, behind folders of tax returns and insurance policies, was a fireproof lockbox. I carried it to the desk, my hands trembling as I dialed the combination. Bella's birthday. The irony was a fresh, sharp pain. The lid opened with a soft click. Inside were the artifacts of our life together. Our marriage certificate, the deed to the house, Elena's death certificate. And there, nestled beneath it all, was a long, cream-colored document with a raised seal. Isabella's birth certificate. I had looked at it 1,000 times. I had memorized every line. The time of birth, 4:17 a.m. The weight, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. I had always focused on the top part, on the beautiful, official fact of her existence. I had never truly scrutinized the bottom. I pulled it out, smoothing it on the desk under the glow of the lamp. My eyes, dry and gritty from lack of sleep, scanned the information I knew by heart. Child's name, Isabella Marie Rossi. My breath hitched. I forced my gaze downward to the section labeled father. Name of father, John William Rossi. A wave of dizzying, irrational relief washed over me. It was my name. It was right there. For a single, blissful second, I thought the diary was a nightmare, a fiction. Maybe Bella was wrong. Maybe Elena's fears were unfounded. But then, my eyes, sharpened by betrayal, caught the detail I had always overlooked, the detail that now screamed for attention. Signature of informant. The informant was the person who had provided the information to the hospital. The person who had filled out this form, who had declared to the world that I was the father. The name written there, in a familiar, elegant script, was not a doctor. It was not a nurse. It was Elena Maria Rossi, my wife. She had been the one to fill out this form. She had written my name in this box. She had stood there, or sat there in her hospital bed, and had legally, officially, and willfully committed this fraud. This piece of paper, which I had cherished for a quarter of a century, was not a record of fact. It was the cornerstone of her lie. The relief evaporated, replaced by a colder, harder reality. The diary was the confession. The birth certificate was the forged document. Together, they formed an incontrovertible truth. I was not Isabella's biological father. The knowledge was no longer a shocking blast. It was a heavy, leaden weight settling in my chest, permanent and suffocating. I stare at my name on that line. John William Rossi. It looked like the name of a fool, a dupe. A man who had built a cathedral on a crack in the earth, and was only now, as the walls crumbled around him, noticing the fissure at his feet. I thought of Bella finding this. She must have gone through her mother's things, found the box, read the diary, and then, in a furious, heartbroken daze, she had looked at this very document. She saw her mother's signature. She saw my name. And she had concluded that I was complicit, that I had known all along and had chosen to live the lie with Elena. Why wouldn't she? The man whose name was on the certificate must have put it there, or, at the very least, agreed to it. She didn't see a victim. She saw a co-conspirator in the erasure of her true identity. I carefully, slowly, folded the birth certificate and placed it back in the lockbox. There was no rage left, no tears. There was only a vast, empty landscape of loss. I had lost my daughter twice over, first to the truth of her paternity, and second to her belief in my deception. The name on the certificate was mine, but the child it represented was gone. Weeks bled into a gray, featureless landscape. The house was a museum of a life that had never truly been mine. I functioned on autopilot. I ate, I slept, I went to work. But I was a ghost. The diary and the birth certificate were locked away, but their truth was a constant, low hum in the background of my every thought. The betrayal by Elena was a deep, festering wound, but the loss of Bella was an amputation. I was a limb that had been severed, yet I could still feel the phantom pain of her presence. I made no attempt to contact her. What could I possibly say? I just found out I'm not your father, too. It would sound like a pathetic, belated lie. In her eyes, I was the man who had stolen her real identity, who had pretended for 25 years. My silence would only confirm my guilt in her mind, but any attempt at explanation felt futile, like shouting into a hurricane. Then, one rainy Thursday evening, the doorbell rang. I ignored it. It rang again, more insistent. A part of me, a foolish, hopeful part, wondered if it was her. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was David. My heart, which had leapt for a foolish second, sank. He stood on the porch, his shoulders hunched against the rain, his face etched with a grim determination. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to hear the accusations, the pleas, the questions I couldn't answer. But I was tired of hiding. I unlocked the door and opened it. We stood facing each other, the rain pattering on the porch roof between us. "John," he said, his voice steady. "David, can I come in?" I stepped back, wordlessly granting him entry. He walked into the living room, wiping his feet, looking around as if he expected the place to have changed. It hadn't. It was still the same tomb. He didn't sit. He turned to face me. "She's not doing well," he said, getting straight to the point. I said nothing. What was I supposed to say? "She's shattered," he continued, his voice softening. "She found that box a month before the wedding. She didn't tell me until after it happened. She thought you knew. She thought you and her mother had lied to her together her entire life." I looked at him, finally meeting his gaze. The anger I expected wasn't there. Instead, I saw exhaustion and a desperate need for understanding. "I didn't know, David," I said, my voice rough from disuse. "I found out the same way she did. I read the diary after the wedding. I saw the birth certificate. The confession hung in the air." David's eyes widened slightly, the pieces clicking into place for him. The confusion, the raw shock on my face at the wedding, it hadn't been an act. "My God," he whispered. "She thinks she's been so angry. At you, at her mother, at the world." "I loved her mother," I said, the statement feeling hollow and meaningless now. "And I love Bella. I still love her. That part was never a lie. Not for me." "I believe you," David said, and the simple conviction in his words was the first small flicker of warmth I had felt in weeks. "But she doesn't. She's packed her life with this narrative of betrayal. It's all she can see." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "She found him, John. She found Michael. The air left my lungs. Of course she had. The diary would have given her enough. A name, a history. She would have hunted down the truth, the biological source of her own existence." "He's a professor in Oregon," David said quietly. "Married, 2 kids. He had no idea about Bella. He was shocked. They've spoken on the phone." I felt a bizarre, painful stab of sympathy for this stranger, this Michael, whose tidy life had just been upended by a ghost from his past. And I felt a deeper, more profound grief for myself. I had been replaced. The father she needed, the one with the shared biology, had been found. What did she tell you to do here, David? I asked, my voice flat. To serve me with papers? To tell me to stay away? No, he said, shaking his head. She doesn't know I'm here. I came because I see two people I care about being destroyed by a secret that wasn't theirs to keep. I see my wife in agony, and I see the man who raised her, who taught her to ride a bike and walked her down the aisle to me, looking like his own ghost. He took a step closer. She's your daughter, John. Maybe not by blood, but by every other measure that has ever mattered. You changed her diapers. You held her when she was scared. You are her father. Tears I thought had all dried up welled in my eyes, hot and sharp. I turned away, unable to bear his kindness. It doesn't matter what I am, I said, staring out the window at the rain. It only matters what she believes I am. It matters, David insisted. It has to matter. She's flying out to see him next week. To meet him. The finality of it was a death knell. She was going to her real father. Then it's over, I said. Or, it's a beginning, David replied. Maybe she needs to see him to understand what she really had here. Maybe she needs to see that biology is just a recipe, but a father is the love and the work and the time. That's you. He left soon after, leaving me with his words echoing in the silent house. A father is the love and the work and the time. Days passed. The day of her flight arrived. I sat in my chair, imagining her at the airport, boarding the plane, flying toward the truth of her bloodline. I thought of the locket of the smiling man who was now a real person with a voice and a life. And then my phone buzzed. A single text message from Bella. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an explanation. It was just 4 words. My flight is delayed. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. It wasn't I love you. It wasn't I'm sorry. It was a statement of fact, but it was also an opening. A tiny, fragile thread thrown across the chasm between us. She was telling me she was still here. For now. I didn't know what would happen when she finally met Michael. I didn't know if our relationship could ever be repaired. But in that moment, I made a choice. I would not let Elena's lie define the rest of our lives. I would not surrender my title without a fight. My real daughter wasn't the one defined by a name on a fraudulent birth certificate. My real daughter was the woman I had raised, the one who was hurting, the one who had, in her own broken way, just reached out. I picked up my phone, my fingers trembling. I typed a reply, my own simple 4-word truth.